This conference will now be recorded.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I'd like to announce this. All public sessions of the South Whitehall Township Board of Commissioners are electronically recorded, filed, and posted to the Township website for public access. At this time, I'll ask our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, to please review our public virtual meeting rules.
Thank you. The public virtual meeting rules are as follows. Courtesy of the floor for non-agenda items will be at the beginning and end of the agenda. Public comment will be limited to 5 minutes per speaker. For all listed agenda items, the board president will call for courtesy of the floor prior to the Board of Commissioners taking action on that specific agenda item. For in-person attendees, please raise your hand to be recognized, then move to the podium when directed. You will be asked to state your name and address for the record and may then proceed with asking your question. For those participating virtually, please mute your microphone or telephone to avoid any background noise that may cause interference during the meeting. The chat box feature will be active throughout the meeting. If you have a comment or question, please type your full name and address into the chat box. The staff member monitoring GoToMeeting will then unmute your microphone and you'll have the opportunity to comment or ask a question. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I'd also like to announce the Board of Commissioners met in executive session on August 26th and prior to tonight's meeting to discuss legal and personnel matters. Agenda item 4 is courtesy of the floor. This is opportunity for any member of the public to comment on any non-agenda items. Is there anyone present this evening who'd like to address the board? Yes, sir. If you please come up to the podium. If you'd please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Mark Ackerman. I live at 1148 North 25th Street, and it's an Allentown address. I am the chairman of the Park and Rec Board. I'm here tonight to clarify some things that I feel were misrepresented of our committee over the summer. We do not meet we are not scheduled to meet over the summer, but the last caveat that I give to my members is that if something big comes up, we are going to meet. And I want everyone up sitting on the board to know that we're not slacking. We're not taking the summer off. We're going to work. That mainly is set up so that because we have the summer program and the director or manager, they're running that summer program every day, and to have them come in at night for half an hour, 20 minutes just doesn't make sense. But if something major, and with the park issue that we have, that's going to be addressed tonight, that I consider something major and was quite upset that we weren't called and I talked to Chris and I talked to Tom about this issue, and I just want everyone sitting on the board to know that we're not slackers. We're here to work. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else present who would like to address the board? Is there anyone online, Dave?
Okay.
No one? Okay. Moving on to agenda item 5, meeting minutes from the August 21st, 2024 Board of Commissioners meeting have been distributed in advance to the commissioners. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve? Is there a second? Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Commissioner Hodges? Commissioner Hodges, can you hear us?
Aye, yes, aye.
Very good, thank you. Agenda item 6, presentations. 6A, we have our July 2024 financial review year-to-date report, and our Township Manager, Tom Petrucci, will present.
Thank you. So all the financials are as of July. So the general fund is currently tracking on pace for 78.5% of budget for the revenue. So from the last time that we were here, we've taken in significantly more revenue for business privilege tax, real estate tax, and amusement tax. So expense is only 43% of budget to date. So we have still a net revenue deficit of $354,929. But again, that's just due to the fact that where we are in the year, we've not taken in all of the anticipated revenue for the year. So similar trends across each of the funds for fire tax, which is a companion tax for the real estate tax. So very, very much on par there as well. We also, in the water fund, revenue is 54.3% of budget. Expense is 33.83%. Again, we're tracking, very, very well there. Yeah, I actually was reading the wrong column. I'm sorry, I apologize. So I'll start over. General fund actual was, the percentages were correct. Our net revenue has been $6,882,162.84. So we are well above our current projections. Same thing for the fire tax fund, $721,097.71 surplus there. Water fund, $883,174.24 for the surplus. Sewer fund, $494,643.87 for the surplus. Refuse recycling fund, $821,898.83 for the surplus. Capital fund right now, we've not made all of our transfers and we've not received all the grant reimbursement to date, so that's why you're seeing a little bit of a deficit there. In state highway aid, it's the same thing. Revenue $731,000, $332,000 expenses for $399,345.07 surplus to date. So across all the major funds of the township, we are trending positively, extremely positively in some cases. So the finance team has been doing an excellent job, and each department has been doing a very good job of monitoring their budgetary expenses and ensuring compliance with the budget. So thank you to all involved. Sorry for my earlier snafu and reading the wrong column, but got it back on track.
Thank you, Tom, and please pass our appreciation on to all of the staff and departments for the budget staying on task and complying with the approved budget. It's very, very nice to see.
Absolutely. Yep, we couldn't do it without all the department heads and each of the employees responsible for procurement.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You don't see any hiccups coming for the last quarter of the budget year that will throw this off kilter from the positive direction we're headed?
I do not. What we'll see is we'll have a little the customary transfers at the end of the year, where things have slightly gone over or we have to make adjustments in the budget, but nothing significant. You're still going to have the same outcome of everything trending in the correct direction, with the revenue exceeding overall and expenses being just under. Here or there, you might have a line item though that exceeds, but overall you're trending very positively, as you have done the last couple fiscal years.
All right, thank you.
Excellent. Agenda item 6B, we have PFM Financial Advisors LLC water and sewer rate projections. And Tom, would you introduce this agenda item?
Okay, so Township Administration previously received authorization from the Board of Commissioners to allow PFM Financial Advisors LLC to conduct a water and sewer rate revenue requirement study. So just to briefly summarize, the purpose of the study was to ensure that future revenues and expenditures for the water and sewer public utility systems are adequately forecasted, to establish a baseline prior to the completion of the Clients Island Sewer System Act 537 plan update and related capital improvements, and to ensure equitable rates are charged for both water and sewer utilities, and that sufficient revenues are produced to sustain the operations and capital requirements of the system. To account for the following: future capital projects, growth or decline in system customers, operations and maintenance expenses, debt service agreements, trends in water and sewer usage, as well as other variables that affect future rates, and provide the fiscal decision makers and the governing body with the data information required to access the potential future trajectory of utility rates. So allowing the board and management to work together to develop a long-term fiscal plan for utility planning. So tonight we're not requesting any official action on any type of rates. We're just going through the findings from on a preliminary basis with representatives here from PFM Financial Advisors, which I'll allow you to introduce yourselves.
Great. Well, thank you very much. You've highlighted everything, the reason why you're supposed to do this. So my name is Jamie Schlesinger. I was here a few years ago talking about the bond side of the world, and PFM as a business spends most of its time working with local governments to figure out long-term capital planning and ultimately getting to a proper execution of a financial transaction. But we also spend our time working with water and sewer utilities throughout the Commonwealth and throughout the country. So our expertise kind of ties to one another when we consider planning for these type of situations associated with very large potential capital coming down the road, given the Clients Island situation, and of course the large growth opportunities that we've seen with townships in this area. So Ben Kappenstein, who's going to do the bulk of the presentation here, are going to discuss both the water and the sewer fund and how we came to a decision point and some overall projections. As Tom brought up earlier, this is a very strong utility overall when you look at both the water and sewer fund. But given some of the variables that are coming down the road, this is entirely why you should do this, because you want to know and understand what you're potentially going to be considering in the future as the budget process goes on. And I believe for purposes of local governments, this is a great best practice that should be done on a routine basis, just given the fact that there's always capital coming down the road or other things that we're just not anticipating. So I think this will help both future potential bond ratings when we're talking about that side, and then more importantly, to allow you the information necessary to make your decisions in a well thought out manner. So I'll stop and let Ben talk about the good news.
Yeah, thank you. Good to be here. So I'm going to start with the water fund, since that's the easier one to talk about. And I think kind of what Jamie led with is we have good news kind of all around. I mean, both of your systems are very structurally sound financially. Currently, there are a lot of capital projects and the Lehigh County stuff coming. But right now, as you're going to see in both of these reports, things are doing pretty well in both the water and sewer fund. So I just want to preface with that. But starting with water, so if you turn to that projection, I'm just going to tick through some stuff here. If you have questions, please feel free to stop me. So a little bit about your water fund financially. The system has about 6,800 equivalent dwelling units. That's kind of to represent customers. And there's a lot of growth. Jamie mentioned growth. So there's a 22% potential growth of those customers over the next 10 years. Our period that we're looking at is a 10-year period. That's pretty significant. Not everybody has growth like that. So that's a big part of this. But even bigger on the water side is there's a significant customer that's coming online in 2026, which is Nestle. They're projected to use about 500,000 gallons per day. And what that means in numbers is it's about $1.3 million in revenue with very little expense associated with it. The reason being is because the way I understand it, you'll be using the current wells that you already have to supply the water, so it's not going to cost anymore for the price of the water, but you'll get all the revenue on the other side. So it's pretty significant. It's not often you get $1.3 million in revenue coming in with no offsetting expenses. So that's going to really affect your projections, and it's a big part of this entire study here. So along with that, on the other side, capital expenditures, pretty significant capital spend on the water side in the next 10 years. It's about $10.9 million that you're expected to spend. And very importantly, right now, your cash on hand in the water fund is strong. So you have 360 days of cash on hand. It's about $3.5 million at the end of 2023. So that's a little bit about the financial highlights. Then we get into the assumptions that were made for the modeling. So we assumed your rate structure stayed the same as it is, and your rate structure is currently a quarterly base charge plus a volumetric charge per 1,000 gallons. For operating expenses, we assumed inflation at 4% for the next 2 years because inflation is still running a bit high, and then it drops to 3% thereafter. We also have some other line items growing at historical growth rates. The water purchase was a little bit higher at 5.74%, so that's growing at that rate. We assumed only half of the customer growth that we talked about on the previous thing because of conservatism. So we never like to assume the full amount of customers that can get you in trouble, and it's got some other places in trouble. So we assumed half of that growth actually comes to fruition. And importantly here, again, Nestle, without Nestle being added, it would change everything. So these projections would be completely different. So that's something that we definitely want to keep our eye on, is to make sure that they come online the way we think they're going to come online, and the revenue actually comes in. And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. So initial findings, hearing all that, we're going to get into some numbers in the back here, but no rate increases are projected to be necessary through 2034 in the water fund. That's as of today. Things change, obviously, and a big part of that, again, is Nestle. So if anything changes with that, it'll definitely change these results. Actually, depending if Nestle comes in at that revenue amount with the no expenses, you could potentially explore a rate decrease in the future on the water side, which is not something you typically talk about with utilities. Customers love a rate decrease, obviously, but what we're suggesting now is not to do that currently, to keep the rates where they are for 2025. Make sure Nestle comes on and you actually achieve that revenue that we think we're going to achieve. If that happens and you get a year or two down the line and things keep building, you're going to see some really high numbers of building up cash. You might want to consider a rate decrease in the future, depending how things go. So all in all, pretty good news on the water side. So if you turn to page 3, this is all going to look pretty simple because we're not projecting any rate increases, but that top graph there, you can see the required quarterly bill for a customer that uses 12,000 gallons a quarter, and that's someone we consider an average customer. They're currently paying $119 a quarter, and they'll continue to pay $119 per quarter. Someone who uses no gallons, a minimum user, pays $30 now. They'll continue to pay $30 throughout the projection period. Now, here's where the big numbers come in. So right now, your balance is at $3.5 million of cash, fund balance. At the end of the projection period, it's projected to be about $14.8 million if all this revenue comes to fruition from Nestle. That's a pretty big balance for this size fund, and that's the reason for the potential rate decrease talk. If it actually builds up that high, that's when you might want to start looking at, potentially giving customers some relief. Next page, we can go real fast here because, again, there's no increases. So you see that. You can see how your rates are calculated there. So your quarterly base charge is $30, and your volumetric charge per 1,000 gallons is $7.44. And it calculates out to those bills below. And again, we're suggesting no changes. So then we like to say, okay, how does the township's water rates compare to other water providers across the Commonwealth? And here we look at all kinds of different providers. So there's other townships, other boroughs, there's municipal utilities, and there's private companies as well. So we looked at 50 different water rate zones across the Commonwealth, and we compared South Whitehall, and you can see that you're pretty well below the average. So the average is about $610 per year for the average water bill. You're at $477. Pretty good. The maximum here is $983, and the minimum is $292. So all in all, projecting no rate increases needed, strong fund balance, and rates lower than the average, hence why the water fund's doing pretty well and in a good spot. The rest of this is just backup, so you can look at that. If you have any questions, happy to answer them. This just provides the revenues and expenses and the fund balance growing on page 7. So that's the water fund. Again, that's the easy one to talk about. Any questions? Yeah.
Yes, if you have questions.
So what would be the average cash on hand was your recommendation?
Yeah, so that's a good question. If you look at page 7 and you look at the very bottom, there's what's down there. It's called the Moody's Financial Strength Score. That's what we use to gauge fund balance. So right now you have 360 days. It's a AAA score, the highest score you can get. Since you're already there, we'd like to see you stay in that AAA category. Not everybody's there, but since you're already there, once you get to the far right bottom, you see 912 days. So that's like you're getting up to 3 years of cash on hand. It's probably too much. There's not a perfect answer for you, but I would strive to stay in the AAA category if I was you guys. That's what I would do. So, somewhere in the 360 or above days cash on hand.
So when you looked at the capital projects, did you take into account of potentially replacing wells because of age or a second tank for Huckleberry for Western development?
It's a good question. So we input the townships, whatever the capital plan was that we were given, that's what we put in. I don't know specifically if those projects were included, but.
Yeah, when we had the discussion online, we told you about the $4.5 to $5 million reservoir. So they did know about that. We did have to add one project though. It's not urgency, but we will have the tapping fee if Nestle would come on to replace the pumps at the Springhouse Water Station, which we will ultimately need to get water to the new reservoir. So they did have the full CapEx plan that will be presented at this year's budget also. So yes, they did have water and sewer CapEx plans going forward.
But to clarify, the CapEx plan doesn't account for a new well currently over the next.
No, we have to be careful where we put the well because we have restrictions in the agreement with the city of Allentown to how many we can have and where they can go.
So
Yeah, I was just wondering, some of our wells have been around for a few years and.
Yes, and with the testing and everything, we haven't had any issues that would indicate that one is going to fail us yet. So, but we are looking in the northern tier to possibly add another well at some point if we can find a good fracture in the land to be able to put one there. Yes.
But if one did fail, it would be a significant expense. Yeah.
What you do have to remember is when we ran the Nestle calculation, Chris, you weren't on the board yet. We did cripple the system by taking our largest producing well offline, and we were still able to accommodate the 500,000 gallons a day.
No, I'm just saying, like, worst case scenario that in the capital plan to replace a well wherever it may fail, was that included also?
No, we currently don't have one. We have for well pump replacements and stuff like that on the wells, but we do not have one in the CapEx plan as of today yet.
Well, one point on that, we could always run another scenario easily that would show, you come up with a cost that's $2 million. We could update this and show you what it looks like at that. That's kind of what the projections are for, the model set up. So whenever you get new numbers, we're happy to update it.
That was part of our agreement to give the ability to do updated versions of this in future years based on new information. The decision point of do you amortize an new well or do you use cash will be things that we could discuss as part of this, which includes the concept of keeping a certain amount of days cash on hand and other items that are tied to this. I want to add one additional fact. Because we talked about the Moody's score here, since the township issued bonds a couple years ago, Moody's Investor Service actually changed their methodology to expand the overall scope of the overall revenues of local governments. Although they always looked at water and sewer funds as part of their analysis, they've now taken a deeper dive into the overall availability of funds and other uses. So by the township having a wide array of revenues on both the water, sewer, and general fund, you're actually looking better on the new scope when you consider the methodology for Moody's. Your current rating is a AA2 credit rating, and you can see from the bottom, the one metric that we're using in this study is the days cash on hand, which is at a AAA. Again, that's one little piece of it, but understand when we do all these decision points, we want to think big picture because we want to manage and maintain the overall rating of the township should we go out for any future capital needs. The higher the rating, the lower the interest rate. So that goes into the concepts as well.
Thank you.
I just want to add one more point that I meant to cover, which was, I mean, I think the township should be commended that we do a lot of these rate studies. Not everybody is planning to spend this much capital in their system. So there's a lot of places that defer a lot of maintenance, don't put a lot of capital into their systems, keep rates low, and then have big problems later. You're investing almost $11 million over 10 years into the systems, and, it's fully paid for in your rates already. So just to commend the township for, setting up this fund and being financially stable the way it is. It's good for customers. So, any other water questions before we move to sewer?
I do have a
Anyone?
question. Can you hear
Yes.
me?
Yes.
Okay, hi. I was looking at the projections, the water projections, and while I was looking at them, I noticed that for water, the new EDUs in 2025 were 78. Then in 2026 went up to 79, which I take would be the addition of Nestle coming on board. And then in 2027, it goes back to 78, and then we jump back up to 98 in 2030, which I would think is the addition of new development. We're going to be built out with some of our bigger developments. But I was just wondering why the fluctuation? Why did we go to 78 and then to 79 and then back to 78? And I was just wondering how you got those projected values.
Yeah, good question. So got them from the township, but the 79, you got it right. It's the Nestle. That's the one customer that's additional. So that's why it's different there. The other ones, is there a specific reason they were growing bigger on the back end? I can't remember, but I could follow up with you on why they changed to 98. But definitely the one, it was the growth
based
projections
on
that were provided.
where we're at with certain large projects, development projects in the township.
Okay, that makes sense. But then why would Nestle bump it up to 79, but then in 2027 we go back to 78? Like what are we losing there?
It's a difference of one EDU. I'm not sure exactly.
So in 2025, you're expecting 78 new customers. In 2026, you're expecting 79 new customers. And then in 2027, you're back to expecting 78 new customers. The only difference was that Nestle, that was just an additional customer. The rest of it is just based on the township's development plans. And again, it's only half of the development that's assumed, so we're being conservative.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? Are there any public questions? Very good. Thank you very much for that presentation.
Sure. So now we'll take the sewer, and you're going to see a very similar setup here. A little bit different answer, but similar setup. So on the sewer side, there's about 7,786 EDUs. Similar growth trajectory as the water side. We actually use the same growth, I believe. Sewer side is expected to spend about $6.1 million over the next 10 years. It's important that is non-treatment related. So that's money that's being spent on the township's collection system, not the Lehigh County stuff that we're going to talk about as well. Sewer fund has even more cash on hand than the water fund, 5.6 million or 577 days of cash on hand, so extremely strong. And then, the big thing on the sewer side is what we've kind of talked about already is this new LCA capital debt service charge, or whatever it's going to be called eventually, is going to drastically change things and increase costs for the township. We don't know exactly when it's going to happen or exactly how it's going to be charged because it's still being figured out. But we did add significant costs in here based on the best information that we know today of what we think it could be starting in 2027. So I know that's a moving target, changes a lot. I'm working with a bunch of your neighbors who are also dealing with that. So I know everybody's kind of waiting to see how that's going to fall out. And like I said on the water, we can update this if we need to in the future. Modeling assumptions for sewer, rates structure stays the same again, quarterly base charge and a volumetric charge. Inflation assumptions are the same. Again, conservative, assumed half of the customer growth. We have the treatment cost for LCA growing at 3% a year. A little bit different on the sewer side is some of the capital projects. In order to keep rates down, we were asked to look at borrowing for some of these capital projects. So we assumed 3 borrowings. And what a borrowing does is you're going to pay interest, right? So that's the downside. But the upside is instead of spending $3.1 million of cash in 2025, it's going to be a much lower number, and it'll be a 10-year debt service or a 15-year debt service. So it'll give you the ability to keep rates lower annually. That could change, obviously. You know, when you get out to 2029, you might have extra cash and say, we'll just pay for it in cash, right? But for now, it's projected that there's 3 borrowings, and you'll see that in the projections later. So on the sewer side, the initial findings, we went through a bunch of different projections, a bunch of different things with the township, and we came up with a plan that shows 4% rate increases each year through 2034. There was things that you could do more rate increases up front. You could wait a little bit, do more in the back and do, nothing, 20%, or you could do this steady 4% increase. And that's kind of where we landed. Doesn't mean it's where you have to land ultimately, but that's kind of where the study landed. So you're going to see the projections at 4% increase per year through 2034. Again, what that does, it reduces spikes. We always try to stop spikes in utility rates. So, something over 10%, we really want to, charge customers that. So it does keep those out, and it still funds all the stuff that you need to fund in the sewer system. We do say that, each year you should review your budget to make sure that the 4% is still warranted, or if a higher number is warranted. This is, a projection. It's going to change. So each year at budget time, just like the rest of your budget, you'll look at it and make sure that it's still on par. Customer growth is extremely important, and without it, the increases would be higher, similar to the water side. So if you turn to the next page, there's 2 graphs here. The top graph shows a minimum user. This is someone using 0 gallons a quarter. They're paying $35 currently in 2024, and by the end of the projection period, they will pay $52 per quarter. And you can see the 4% increases per year. And then an average customer at 12,000 gallons a quarter currently pays $92. And at the end of this projection period, they would pay $137. Again, at 4% a year. Next page shows the sewer fund balance. So a little bit different than water. You're still building here. You're going from 5.6 million in 24 to 6.5 in 2034. But really what's happening in the sewer fund is you're actually, you're going to see on a future page, using some cash. There's some deficit years in order to keep rates at this 4% for the customer. So in essence, you're still building cash, but you could build a lot more if you raised more in rate, right? But you want to give customers a good balance. So that 4% strikes the balance and still raises your fund balance over the projection period. So we feel it's okay. So focusing on 2025, what does this mean for a customer? So if you would do the 4% increase on the sewer side, the quarterly base charge would go from $35 to $36.40. The volumetric charge from $4.79 per 1,000 gallons to $4.98 per 1,000 gallons. And then a minimum bill would increase by $1.40 per quarter, and an average bill would increase by $3.70 per quarter under these increases. Any questions there? So again, similar to water, how do you look compared to others, sewer providers? And here I'd say it's even more drastic. So you're at $370 annually on the sewer side. The average that we calculated is $741, so it's higher on sewer. There's some really high sewer rates out there. We have some clients that have some really high sewer rates. So you were on the very low side, I would say, of sewer rates in Pennsylvania, which is a good thing because you're going to need to raise it for this LCA capital stuff. So you're in a good position. It's not great to have to raise rates, but you're in a good starting spot to do so.
I just have a quick question on
Yes.
that. Correct, my math might be wrong, but even over the 10-year period, at the end of that 10 years, obviously the municipalities may have to raise their rates, may change the averages. We would still be under the average.
Yeah, I didn't do the math, but probably, yeah. Yeah, you're really low. I mean, the sewer side at $370 a year is really low. It's not the lowest. There's someone has $50 a year, which is crazy, but 370 is very much on the low side, which I was glad to see, again, because it's going to need to increase. So yeah, that's a good point. And you have that room to do it and not go crazy and charging people $1,500 a year for sewer. So the next page is just that backup. And I just wanted to show you, if you look, there's a line called surplus deficit down there. You'll see some red numbers. So there's a couple years there where basically it's a planned deficit. So if you look at 2027, there's a planned deficit of $223,000. And that's basically saying that we're going to eat into our fund balance so that we don't have to raise rates more for the customers in that year. It's just a way for you to kind of level out the rates for customers. That's how we're doing it. So I just wanted to illustrate it for you. But in the end, your fund balance stays above $5 million and eventually ends up higher at 6.5. So still a good story. You have to raise rates, so that's not always the best, but you're in a good spot to do so again. So.
And you can also see when you do that, when you look at the indicative Moody's score, that same days cash on hand, even when you're using some of that deficit in those years, you're not dropping below the AAA status. So it's serving two purposes for you.
We kept it at AAA to make sure you stayed in that class. So, yep, good point.
We should just touch on the debt service just so they can see that.
Sure.
Changes.
Yeah, so the debt service there, there's a debt service line under expenses, and each of those highlights there is when the new debt service starts for the three borrowings. So to start in 25, you would have $226,000 of debt service. And then in 2029, you'd do another small borrowing, and that would raise to $319,000 of debt service. And then similarly in 32, you do another small borrowing, and you can see those numbers are pretty small. If you would want to pay for it in cash, it'd be a lot bigger numbers, a lot bigger hits in each year, which could be done potentially, but would have a different picture here and probably, cause some different actions that you would have to take. So again, this isn't set in stone, but this is kind of how we ran it here to keep those rates at 4% increases.
And I would argue, as a person that does debt for a living, when you're talking about items that are long-term capital needs that have long-term useful lives like 20 years, traditionally you amortize those over a longer period of time because the people that are going to benefit from those assets should be paying for them while they're being utilized. So the argument is you borrow for long-term capital and you use cash for items that are short-term. Simple enough.
One more thing on here I just wanted to point out. So if you look at, there's an estimated LCA capital debt service charge under expenses. So that's the amount that we're expecting or projecting right now for that LCA. So in 27, it hits and it's $707,000. And it raises up a little bit over time. And then I believe once you get out past our projection period, it's expected to increase even more from there. But that's kind of outside of, 10 years, but it is expected to go up. That could all change. I don't think anything's final, so we'll find out where it ends, but that's the best we know at this point.
Hence why there's some value in maintaining a strong reserve for some of the unknowns that are just unknown at this point.
Just to clarify, I know that the LCA capital debt service charge is an estimate. So based on these calculations and projections in 2027, when we expect that charge may be communicated with the township, it's included in the 4% rate increase that is projected across these 10 years. So residents aren't going to see a huge spike in their quarterly sewer bills because it's built in
Correct.
to this projection.
Yep, correct. So the 4% pays for the LCA charge as well as all your other costs. Yes, correct.
Yeah, the goal here is again to build up the items as we know the things are going to come down the road. So that's why the suggestion is to raise rates this year with the anticipation 2025, with the anticipation we do another 4% thereafter. So by the time that large chunk comes in, you've got that amount built into your rate base.
It's a good point. So if you look in 25, you have a surplus projected $322,000. So you really wouldn't have to raise 4%, but things are coming. And in order to not hit somebody with a 15 or 20% rate increase down the line, you start building for it now because we know it's coming. So that's kind of the philosophy behind it.
And I have one more argument for raising rates, which no one likes to hear, is there's just a cost of inflation in general. We all know there's inflationary costs. Your Comcast bill goes up a certain percentage each year. It should be considered in that same way when you have a utility because cost of operations, cost of the treatment is higher traditionally annually. So we want to make sure you maintain some form of an increase to follow with inflation.
So, to wrap everything up, again, we do a lot of these and both of these funds are very well structurally, financially sound. So it's really good to see. You have a lot of cash on hand. Water fund looks great for the next 10 years. And sewer, you have a plan in place now to pay for these scary costs that are coming from LCA. So, I think you're in a good spot in both of these funds and we're encouraged by the numbers. So happy to answer any other questions.
Does the board have any other questions on the sewer side or anything overall? Monica, Commissioner Hodges, do you have any further comment?
I'm good, thank you.
Very good. Thank you both
Thank you.
for your work and
Thanks
for
to
your
staff.
presentation.
Yeah,
They
thank
did a
you for everything.
fantastic job providing the information and getting on the calls when necessary. So it's
I
a
agree.
good team effort.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, thank you, Tom and Herb and Mike, all staff involved. These are wonderful projections, very helpful information for the board. Moving on to agenda item 7A, we have an ordinance of the Township of South Whitehall, County of Lehigh, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 240, Parks and Recreation of the Codified Ordinances of South Whitehall Township in its entirety, enforcement of violations, fines and penalties, repealer, failure to enforce, not a waiver, severability, and an effective date. And Tom, if you would please present.
Thank you. As previously communicated, township officials have been receiving complaints of these types of activities at Covered Bridge Park that include loud music, cooking and grilling along the banks of the Jordan Creek, taking township property into the Jordan Creek, placing picnic tables and other objects into the Jordan Creek, littering and parking vehicles in areas that are not designated for parking. So after these complaints, we've taken several actions, one of which is before you tonight, which is revised regulations to address some of the concerns. So the comprehensive draft amendment to Chapter 240 of the Code of Ordinances accomplishes a number of things. So it requires a permit to be obtained for multiple activities, and including the use of any recreational buildings, pavilions, and associated grounds of the facilities located in the park system. The permit would be required for the use of athletic fields, to reserve any area in the park system for use. And importantly, it makes the distinction that an activity of 10 or more people is considered an event or assemblage that would require a permit. So this wouldn't apply to anyone using the playground facilities. Use of the park property for commercial purposes, so for example, athletic contests or sales or seminars would be prohibited. And it expands the requirements for a special event permit to be issued. So that includes organized walk or runs. So for example, like 5Ks, half marathons. Also includes birthday parties, company picnics, event festivals, weddings, ceremonies, family reunions, workshops, and any other event deemed a special use by the township. It also clarifies that any event over that 1,010 attendees shall submit an emergency action plan to the township. And that's reviewed by the police department, the township manager, and emergency management director. So there's a number of criteria that must be satisfied prior to the issuance of any permits. So the township would review that criteria and then request additional information as necessary. It sets a 10 miles per hour blanket speed limit for the park system, provides regulations to protect natural areas, the natural environment, and plant life, and regulates a number of categories of activities, including aeronautical, alcoholic beverages, amusement and play equipment, animals, birds and reptiles, specifically the interference of those animals, audio equipment in use, boating, camping, dogs, pets, and other animals, firearms, fires, fireworks, fishing, interference with township personnel, the use of horses, hunting and trapping, illegal drugs, littering, peddling, and swimming, bathing, and wading. Also talks about like basically just general items with tampering with water, drinking fountains, prohibits gambling, prohibits dumping or disposing of any waste or garbage or unwanted material, to not utilize appropriate restroom areas for those designated purposes, engaging in any form of golfing activity, except at designated golfing areas, which we don't really have any right now, but throwing rocks, stones, or other objects from any overlook or cliff, failing to obey posted park signs, camping in this park system unless authorized by part of a special event, using a skateboard, inline skates, or other wheeled apparatus or equipment except within an area designated as a skate park. Again, we don't have any, but just we're planning ahead in case we ever do. Construct or occupy any man-made survival shelters in the park system unless part of an official park system program. Drafting water from waterways that run through the park system without obtaining written permission first. Using a tobacco product, including e-cigarettes, within 50 feet of a recreational field facility. The township is designated as a tobacco-free municipality, so it's important we have that. Release balloons or sky lanterns within the park system. Prohibits polluting the waters. Placing chairs, picnic tables, or any similar objects in township-controlled waters, and placing grills and griddles or any other sort of similar portable cooking equipment shall not be permitted in township-controlled waters or in any area that is not specifically designated for grilling, such as a pavilion area. We've also taken some other actions. We've removed the rope swings and the limbs that they were attached to. We've provided all through this weekend, this past weekend, additional staffing from Public Works and Police Department personnel. And that would be continued. We'll monitor the weather going forward after the Labor Day weekend and see if that needs to be continued. And we've also placed a bollard at one of the trail access sites, as well as additional fencing at the parking lot of Covered Bridge Park. So just to summarize where we're at with this ordinance, the Board of Commissioners had authorized the ordinance at your last meeting to go through to the solicitor for review. That review has been completed. So the township incorporated the comments received from the solicitor. And the primary substance revision is the removal of any relevant sections that should be addressed in the Pennsylvania Crimes Code. We didn't want to duplicate those items. So that would include trespassing, vandalism, personal disorderly conduct, and unlawful obstruction. So they would be enforced by the police department under the Crimes Code. With that being said, following any discussion, as necessary, a motion then is requested to advertise the amendment to Chapter 240 in its entirety.
Thank you, Tom, and thank you for all staff involved in our police department and Public Works, both patrolling down at the park and helping to draft this ordinance for the board's review. I know we've already seen it once. I don't know if there are any other questions from the board at this time.
Yeah, Tom, and under other action, the second bullet point should be the current rate for residents is 85 and the current rate for non-residents is 150.
Correct.
There's a typo there.
Yeah, my apologies.
Any other?
Mark, did you look at this at all? Do you have any comments?
Yeah, I was sent a copy of it. I gave them a copy. The only thing I saw was about fishing's allowed to go all through the night where they're going to park if you're closing off the park lines. But Tom and I discussed that. And he's got a plan for that. So, he did get it out to all members of the Park and Rec Board. And I told him to give me any comments he had, and I'll come because I'm coming tonight. And I've heard nothing. So I imagine you're in good shape.
Yeah, and the fishing issue, we're covered there because we currently have one parking lot that doesn't have a gate, which is the one near Weir's Dam. Or they could park along the street and then enter the park that way. But the language is okay because it says anyone fishing is allowed access to the park. So that would include the parking facilities. But the areas that are gated off, we don't want to encourage anyone going in there because we don't want them stuck there overnight.
Commissioner Hodges, did you have any comment?
I just wanted to thank everybody involved for putting this together, especially for those who enforced it over the summer, because it was a very busy summer. I also wanted to thank you, Tom, and anyone who helped with the verbiage of this, the regulated activities, letter F, the use of e-bikes. I'm happy that that's clarified because e-bikes and e-scooters are becoming increasingly popular and not all the time used in a safe manner. So thanks for addressing that and putting it in. Thank you.
You're welcome.
There are no other commissioner comments. Is there any public comment on this agenda? Is there anyone online with any questions from the public? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to proceed with advertising of said ordinance?
Motion.
Motion is second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Then item 7B, we have an ordinance of the Township of South Whitehall, County of Lehigh, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending Part 2, General Legislation, Chapter 304, Streets and Sidewalks, to add a new Article 5 entitled Snow, Ice, and Sleet Removal to the codified ordinances of South Whitehall Township, and further providing for removal of snow, ice, and sleet from sidewalks, restricting the depositing of snow, enforcement and violations, violation ticket appeal process, fines and penalties, providing for the removal from the codified ordinances of Chapter 148, Conduct, Section 148-1A5, Chapter 155, Drug Paraphernalia in its entirety, and Chapter 221, Loitering in its entirety, repealer, failure to enforce, not a waiver, severability, and effective date. Tom, if you'd please present.
Thank you. So upon review of ordinances of the township, the code enforcement previously only had two options to address snow removal from sidewalks, and the ordinance wasn't very clear. So with that being said, we went ahead and drafted a snow removal ordinance for sidewalks. So this ordinance, and we've seen it a few times now, but I'll just briefly summarize it. So basically, the overall intent is to ensure that snow and ice and sleet accumulation does not create a hazardous condition for the traveling public. Requires snow and/or ice to be removed no later than 24 hours after the cessation of a snowstorm or weather event which causes the buildup of snow or ice on the sidewalk. We didn't put a specific date range because snow and ice events can occur outside of the normal window. Snow and ice shall be removed from a sidewalk for the entire width and entire length of the sidewalk on or fronting said properties. Requires the use of a melting or traction agent in those instances when snow is compacted and or has created a slippery, icy surface. Requires fire hydrants to be clear of snow. Requires ADA ramps and sidewalks and land and bus stops to be clear of snow and ice. Prohibits snow and ice from being thrown on public streets. Prohibits snow and ice accumulation to block stormwater drainage systems. Provides for an enforcement process, including a method to handle appeals, and it removes, as referenced earlier, it talks about cleaning up parts of the code specific to areas relating to the depositing of snow and ice, and also for loitering and drug paraphernalia. So with that, we had received previous direction from the board to have the solicitor review the ordinance. So just to clarify the changes that were made, so as part of this adopted ordinance, it removed the specific day range. It clarifies that the code enforcement can issue tickets without previous warnings, and clarifies that a first violation is $50 and any subsequent offense is $100 with a $10 penalty if the ticket is not paid or appealed within the specified time period of 10 days. It also clarifies that those persons or entities that have been issued a ticket have 20 days to pay the ticket in order to avoid the filing of a citation. With that being said, I'll request a motion to adopt the ordinance as advertised in the August 22nd, 2024 edition of the Parkland Press and sent to the Lehigh County Department of Law on or about August 13th, 2024.
Thank you, Tom. Did the township receive any feedback from the advertisement of this?
We did not.
Very good, thank you. And included in your memo, the township officials, you do plan to have an informational brochure sent out to the public?
We plan to put that in the new e-newsletter.
Very good, thank you. Open it up to the board if there are any additional comments.
The only feedback I got was I'll clean my fire hydrant when the township cleans theirs. So we're careful that if we cite somebody for not cleaning their fire hydrant, that the fire hydrant that's on public property, township property, is cleared also, right? So a little pressure on you there, Herb.
Yeah, we can double check that.
No, I'm just saying that was the only feedback I got, is that if you're going to require me to do it, give me 24 hours.
That's fair and reasonable.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Any other board comment? Commissioner Hodges?
No, good, thank you.
Very good. Is there any public comment on this ordinance? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt said ordinance, amending Part 2, Chapter 304, to add new Article 5 entitled Snow, Ice, and Sleet Removal to the codified ordinances of South Whitehall? We have a motion. Is there a second? Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. My motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Then item 8A, resolutions. We have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township to adopt a formal policy entitled South Whitehall Township Donations to Nonprofit Organizations Policy. Tom, if you'd please present.
Thank you. So as considered by the board under direction and discussion at the last meeting, the township felt it was necessary to put together a donation policy for the consideration of donations to be included in the budget for nonprofit organizations. So they're typically reviewed annually for possible inclusion into the subsequent approved operating budget of the township. So the overall purpose of the policy is to make sure we have consistent and equitable policies and procedures by which to review any donations to ensure that appropriated funds are utilized in a manner that directly benefits residents and makes good use of taxpayer funds. So in order to achieve that overall goal, it is recommended that the Finance Committee be empowered to review materials and criteria which would be in support of those goals, including 2 years of profit and loss statements, current fiscal year operating budget for any nonprofit seeking a donation, Form 990, return of organization exempt from income tax from any organization seeking a donation, a statement on how funds are donated by the township would be specifically utilized, mission statement, breakdown of township resident membership participation for any relevant programs, initiatives, or activities, and statement on how the requested funds will specifically benefit township residents. So basically, the Finance Committee, as mentioned, would review the requests. For example, this year, if you adopt this policy, the Finance Committee meets on October 2nd, so they would have the any requests received on the agenda. This year would be unique because you're really looking at 2 years, 2024 and 2025. But we would need those each year to be received no later than September 30th so that we can potentially include them in the next year's budget. So donation requests deemed administratively complete by the township will be considered in the order they are received. Each nonprofit organization that receives an approved appropriation will receive a specific lump sum amount as recommended by the Finance Committee and finally approved by the Board of Commissioners in its sole discretion. The Finance Committee can recommend that the board establish fiscal limits on the approved donation amount that is available to each nonprofit organization. So we specifically kept it flexible. Some organizations may request more or less depending on the size and scope of the organization. So we'll see how that works. Basically if we need to make future adjustments to that item. But once all appropriated funds have been exhausted with an approved operating budget, no further donation requests will be accepted by the township for that fiscal year. Any subsequent donation requests received would be put into for consideration for the next operating budget cycle. So with that, the policy is ready to be adopted if the board is so inclined.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Thank you for having this under discussion and direction at our last meeting. Interestingly, before I left the building at our last meeting, I went to check my mailbox and we did have a letter from a nonprofit requesting funds for this year. And just for information for the public, it was a very nice letter, but it didn't contain any of the information that you've reviewed in this policy. It was just asking for donation, expressing the work that they do, but it didn't specify specifically South Whitehall residents. I think this is a very good policy, and I thank you for drafting it to have a consistent approach to evaluating taxpayer dollars that are expended for donations. I'll open up to the board if there are any other comments or questions.
Nope, this gives us guidance. Thank you.
Absolutely. Commissioner Hodges?
None, thank you.
No comment. Any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt said resolution for the South Whitehall Township donations to nonprofit organizations policy?
I'll make a motion.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Then item 8B, we have a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of South Whitehall Township, Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, authorizing the conveyance of 0.095 acre of required right-of-way and 0.007 acre of a temporary construction easement to the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania Department of Transportation in lieu of condemnation, authorizing the acceptance of compensation from the Commonwealth, and further authorizing the execution and delivery of all documents to accomplish said conveyance. Tom, if you'd please present.
Thank you. So as part of the PennDOT 309 Betterment Project, which includes improvements to signalized intersections, access improvements, widening to roadway lanes and shoulders, drainage improvements, and roadway resurfacing. As part of that project, PennDOT is actually connecting the township's newly to be installed sidewalk from the township building to 309. So as part of that, they will need to acquire right of way. So specifically 0.095 acres of required right of way, and then 0.007 acres for temporary construction easement. So the right of way acquisition will help provide the sidewalk connection to the campus to 309, which will also eventually have a Atlanta bus stop as well. So it accomplishes a number of planning goals set forth in the township's comprehensive plan. So the amount of the offer is $1,900. So it's $1,800 for the 0.095 acres and $100 for the 0.007 acres. So that works out to $18,947.37 per acre, which is reasonable. Because the amount of the acquisition is under $10,000, PennDOT can utilize the streamlined waiver evaluation method of determining the value of the property. Value is determined to be appropriate, especially factoring in the benefit of the forthcoming sidewalk improvements. So this resolution, if you're inclined to adopt it, allows for the township to accept that offer so that the project for the 309 Betterment can commence. And it follows the eminent domain law, essentially, where we're accepting the offer in lieu of condemnation. So we don't have to follow other first-class township code real estate processes because of the overall benefit of the project. So I seek a motion to adopt the resolution as presented.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Are there any commissioner comments or questions? Commissioner Hodges, did you have any questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Do I have a motion to adopt said I'm sorry, is there any public comment? Nothing online. Do I have a motion to adopt said resolution authorizing to accept an offer of property from PennDOT for the 309 Betterment Project? I'll second. That's fine. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Agenda item 8C, we have a resolution approving sewer planning module for 1619 Houseman Road. And Tom, if you'd present.
I will turn it over to Mike Elias.
Michael.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
1619 Houseman Partners LLC is proposing a medical office building located on a 2.61 acre lot at 1619 Houseman Road in South Whitehall Township. This 32,000 square foot building proposes an anticipated water usage of 2,390 gallons per day or 11 EDUs. Public Works is requesting the approval of 11 EDUs of sewer allocation for that address.
Very good. Thank you, Mike. Are there any board comments or questions? Commissioner Hodges?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to adopt said resolution approving the sewer planning module for 1619 Houseman Road?
Motion.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Aye. Motion carries 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Under motions, 9A, we have a motion to proceed with the release of security for Montage Self-Storage Certification Number 1. Based on the applicant's request to withdraw at this time, they have asked to table this item. Do I have a motion to table?
So
I'll second. Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Then item 9B, we have a motion to proceed with the release of security for Ridge Farms Phase 1A Improvement Security Release Certification Number 8. And I'll ask Dave Manhart, our Director of Community Development, to present.
So this is security reduction number 8 for Ridge Farms Phase 1A. The total reduction, the total release in this request is $283,241.40. The project is very near completion. There are a few outstanding items that will be conditions of a CO. So we do anticipate them getting a CO in the coming days. So they've made a lot of progress over the last few weeks. So it's good to see them moving it along.
Very good. Thank you. And I'll ask our township engineer, Tony Talarita, if there's any comments on this.
We have no objection to the request.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any board comments or questions? Commissioner Hodges?
None, thank you.
Thank you. Is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve said motion?
Motion.
I'll second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dave. Agenda item 9C, we have a motion to proceed with bid regarding furnish and delivery of police uniforms. And I'll ask our interim chief Brown to please present.
Yes, the current contract for police uniforms with Patriot Workwear is expiring this year with no additional extensions available. This contract is used to outfit new officers and replace worn or damaged uniform items for current police officers and staff as needed. We are the police department and purchasing departments is respectfully requesting the board permission to advertise a bid for the purchase of uniforms to enter into contract.
Very good. Thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the board?
Will these bids come back in time for the budget for next year, I take it?
Yes.
Any other questions? Commissioner Hodges?
No, none, thank you.
Very good. Is there any public comment?
And these numbers are these based on new employees and replacing worn uniforms? Like I'm sure they have a contract. They get 2 shirts a year, whatever it may be, right?
Yeah, we have a policy of what first issue is, and then when uniforms get worn, they can turn them in. We can see them.
Those 80, these 80 seems low for 40 officers.
80 uniforms a year.
What says estimated quantity of short sleeve shirt is 80. You have 40 officers.
Yes.
New guys get.
Not everybody gets uniforms replaced every year. It's kind of a wear and tear type thing where maybe they don't.
That's fine. That's
much.
why I'm like, you have 40 officers.
Yes.
You wear them 4 times a week on your shifts. That's only 2 per officer. Plus, if you get new guys, new officers, they probably get 5 or 6 new shirts. So I'm just making sure the quantities going forward.
Yeah, that's been the average.
Okay. All right. That's you're the expert. I'm just want to make sure that.
Right. I understand. Yeah.
At 80, you're good with 80, then okay. But so I was concerned.
Yeah.
And this is a 1-year contract. You
that's correct.
evaluate
It's 1 year,
each year
yes.
based on use. Okay.
And we also have the ability to purchase off of co-stars if there's other one-off needs for uniforms, and that's all factored into the budget as well.
Yeah.
Good. Any other board comment and no public comment? Do I have a motion to approve said motion?
Motion.
Motion is second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries 5-0. Thank you. Then item 9D, we have a motion to send the South Whitehall Landscapes Plan to South Whitehall Township Planning Commission for review. And Dave Manhart, if you'd present.
Yes, so the South Whitehall Landscapes Plan, we're moving it along on the timeline that we presented at the last few meetings. Chris prepared the memo and provided a summary of the edits. A lot of it was minor edits. We did get some feedback on swapping out some of the case studies to some more local ones. So we did that, kind of in the process for that. We also did some reaching out to townships that have similar ordinances, Doylestown Township. We reached out, have conversations with them, so we're incorporating some of the feedback we had from them. It was at the October 26th Environmental Advisory Committee. They voted unanimously to approve and recommended that the plan move on to the Planning Commission. So tonight we're asking that it moves on to the Planning Commission.
Excellent, very good. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Commissioner Hodges, did you have any comment?
No, it all looks good. Thank you.
Very good. Is there any public comment? Hearing and seeing none, do I have a motion to approve said motion? I'll make that motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Motion carries 5-0. Thank you, Dave. Agenda item 10, correspondence and information. We have boards and commissions, informational items. Tom, if you'd please review and present.
Sorry about that. All right. So we have upcoming meetings. Monday, September 9th, 7 p.m. is the Public Safety Commission. Also the same night and time, Parks and Recreation Board meeting. Tuesday, September 10th, 6 p.m. is Crime Watch. Wednesday, September 11th, 10 a.m. is the Civil Service Commission. Thursday, September 12th, 7 p.m. is the Planning Commission. Thursday, September 12th, same time, 7 p.m. is Emergency Management, which is at the Citronia Emergency Operations Center. And Saturday, September 14th, 4:30 p.m., we have the Family Safety Day and movie at Fernwood Park. And then Wednesday, September 8th, 7 p.m., the Board of Commissioners meeting. And also just a little announcement, we have the festival coming up on September 28th as well. So there's a lot of information on the Township website about that.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on to direction discussion. We have Ridge Farm Restaurant pads, and I'll ask our Director of Community Development, Dave Manhart, to please present.
So there's a request, and the letter was included from the developers of the Ridge Farm project to get some feedback on consideration of a text amendment for our residential cluster overlay. They're specifically requesting the possibility of a text amendment to change a sit-down restaurant from 5,000 square feet to 8,000 square feet. So they're looking for a bigger footprint. There were because it's a text amendment, there would be implications to other overlay zones that we would need to consider as we move forward with it. I believe the applicant's representative is here to answer any questions you might have. There's a couple actions or ways we can handle this. We can ask for further evaluation. We can direct the applicant to proceed with a application, or the board could choose to do nothing. So the applicant's representative is here and he can answer some questions and get into some of the details.
Very good. Good evening.
Thank you. Appreciate a few minutes of your time tonight. I'm Jason Engelhardt with Langen Engineering. I'm the site engineer for the Ridge Farm project. So the developer for Ridge Farm for the last two and a half years, there's two 5,000 square foot restaurant pads along the frontage. If you know where St. Luke's is, it's kind of at the right in, right out entrance, just to the east of that. So he's been marketing those for the last couple of years, and what we're hearing consistently is that to provide an upscale restaurant, that a sit-down restaurant that would include all the elements you need, the main dining area, the bathroom accessible circulation around the building, an attractive bar area, all the back of house, everything they need larger than a 5,000 square foot footprint. So in the the T&D zone, that there's a limitation that limits you to 5,000 square feet. Restaurants throughout the township and any other commercial zone, and they're allowed in many others, there is no limitation on that square footage. So in the packet that we provided, we illustrated the currently approved plan, and then there's a second page that proposes, as was discussed, an 8,000 square foot restaurant, in this case on the east side. And then what we proposed on the west side was just making that open space. So currently we're permitted 2 5,000 square foot restaurants. What the developer is willing to do is to, and we're open to any suggestions as we proceed with this, but propose an 8,000 square foot and actually just make the western pad a green space. So he's really willing to give up 2,000 square feet. Ultimately, what we're trying to accomplish is a restaurant that can be of the quality of a sit-down restaurant and a scale that is needed for a tenant in this market. So we've spoken to a number of tenants. In the packet you'll see there's a lot of information from PJ Whalahans, who's expressed a great deal of interest in this site, has also signed a letter of intent, and they're working towards a lease there, but they can't make that work with 5,000 square feet. So what we're asking is what they've described, which is to consider a text amendment, realizing that it'll have impact in other T&D zones within the township. I think there's 4 total that would be impacted by this, but to consider allowing that. And whether we work with staff to work on how that would be pulled together, or we can offer, as Dave described, fill out the paperwork and offer a suggestion on how that text amendment would proceed. But that's what we're looking for at this point. So again, in the packet, there are some images. I expect many of you have certainly eaten at a PJ Whalahans, and of course, until they're formally signed, it's always a possibility something could change, but that is the intention at this point. So there's some images there, and also there in the packet, there's a map that from your zoning map that illustrates the other districts in the township that it would be affected by the text amendment. Are there any questions on what was included?
Thank you for that presentation. I had a question. The pad on the west side, so that would be 5,000 square feet. That would be.
As far as open space, yes, it would be a little larger than 5,000 square feet. That was the size of the building pad there. So you had other pieces around it. So it's really more about roughly double that size. So that can be programmed however we all.
And are you envisioning that would be restricted as open space, be memorialized as open space?
Yes, it would become active open space.
And the sketch that you have of the 8,000 square foot restaurant, it appears that the rain gardens have been removed that were along Walbert.
We really just adjusted the rain garden. The rain garden, there's still a rain garden there provided. It's a little further east along the frontage. So there would still be a rain garden there. The volume would be slightly different, but the way you size a rain garden isn't necessarily strictly related to volume, as long as it provides the function that it needs to provide.
Well, certainly a larger footprint of a building will have an effect on stormwater on that side of the eastern side of that entrance.
Well, overall, the impervious surface would be reduced, at least with this plan, because we're eliminating it on the west side of the entrance. So it's all tributary to the basins to the east. So, and one of the reasons we laid this out this way, and some of this feedback came from staff, was you can see there's outdoor seating. Now, outdoor seating on the east side is intended to feed into the plaza. So you've got the larger plaza that's always been proposed as part of this project, and there's outdoor seating on that side of the building that would kind of work together.
Thank you. I don't have any other questions at this time, but I'll reserve.
I don't think any questions come to mind now. I think you're looking for some feedback. At this point, I'd like some more information, staff review, continue the dialogue. If you'd like to submit an application, I think I'd like to keep the door open on this, but I don't have enough information tonight to make a sort of definitive decision. But I certainly don't want to shut the door on this conversation or potential changes to this. I just like to have some more information and a more thorough review before saying definitively whether or not I would entertain a.
That's a good point. Right, I appreciate that. Certainly, I'm interested in the impact of traffic since it'll be only on the one side. I think that's something that staff would need to look at as well. Are there other?
No, I agree with Jacob. I'd like to hear more about it and look at the impacts, pros and cons, or positive and negative. But yeah, intriguing.
I agree with you.
Okay. Commissioner Hodges, did you have any comment at this time?
Hi, yes. I'm always a believer that it's good to have conversation and continue the dialogue. However, I always think in my head, how will this benefit our residents? And I see it as perhaps taking away choices and just putting one there. Having said that, I have nothing against the restaurant that has interest, but you're giving them less of a choice. You're giving our residents less of a choice. And furthermore, I'd be a little reluctant to change anything that was approved in conditional use. We all knew what the TND consisted of. We all knew its limitations and so forth. And it was presented to the public. So the public saw that. The public saw those diagrams, those pictures. And I'm reluctant to change anything because now everyone has seen that and now we're going to go changing. However, having said that, again, I'm willing to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. I had a similar thought as Commissioner Hodges, having been on the Planning Commission for part of this plan, going through the process with the township for conditional use and preliminary plan approval, multiple public meetings, and I recall a lot of conversation about this development being, live, work, play, have everybody that's in this new development, almost 900 homes, to have amenities for them to recreate, to have dining for a medical facility, and to reduce their dining options to one is certainly a cause so it makes me pause to consider this as well, but I am open to having further discussion. I do agree with the other commissioners. I think it is wise to have our staff to continue to work with you if you'd like to submit a plan with more detail so the board has more information to understand the impacts of this. I think at this point it would need to be funded by the escrow account of the developer at this point. But I don't really have any other comment.
Okay.
Sounds like a unanimous direction is open but skeptical.
Yeah.
So proceed as
Right,
with that feedback.
Is there any other direction staff needs from us at this point?
No, I think we have an idea of some of the concerns and we can work with the developers team to kind of get that in a format that you guys can evaluate some of the impacts, some of the concerns that were brought up in a more concrete manner. Decide if you want to move this forward.
I did just want to address one comment. You mentioned earlier that other commercial districts don't have this 5,000 square foot restriction, and that is true. But when this plan was presented to the township and worked its way through the development process, the developer chose to use the TND overlay. And one of the stipulations of that, the criteria which permitted the developer to have increased density, was to also comply with this more town center, the restaurant restrictions for size. Certainly something that the developer knew coming in and worked through the process. And that would explain why the restriction is here as opposed to a regular commercial district. I just want to clarify that.
Understood.
Very
Yes.
good.
Yeah, and this is coming out of marketing those pads for this period of time. Some of it's impacted by the results of how COVID has changed some of the restaurant industry, but some of it's just to have all the components you need for a quality sit-down restaurant. So, but yeah, I appreciate all your feedback, and we'll work with staff.
Excellent. Very good. Thank you. We have no old business tonight. We're at agenda item 13, which is courtesy of the floor. Again, an opportunity for any member of the public to address the board on any non-agenda items. Is there anyone present this evening who'd like to address the board? Very good. Hearing and seeing none. Agenda item 14, I need a motion to authorize payment of invoices and disbursements. Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Sorry.
Motion carries 5-0. We have no executive session to schedule this evening. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.